My favorite scene in Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse is
He never lets anyone at those big fancy places he's gonna be in tell him that he doesn't belong there.
hearing Rio speak to Miles about belonging always gets a tear in my eye, because I truly believe it's something that everyone needs to hear. They need to hear that they are loved, and they need to feel like they belong. Because belonging is one of the most powerful feelings that you can experience. And this question gets constantly thrown around the internet and in the movie itself. Does Miles Morales deserve to be Spider-Man? And in a vaster sense of the question, does Miles Morales belong? And I can't fathom why some people are so adamant that Miles does not belong as Spider-Man. Belonging is so important, and for so long in my life, I found it impossible to find that feeling. The absence of belonging has left me scarred, depressed, and alone. While the world becomes more connected digitally, it also becomes a place where you can feel an overwhelming sense of missing out. And I love coming back to this scene, hearing Rio's words and watching her embrace her son. This moment fills me with love. It fills me with hope that anyone, including me, can find that place where they belong. It fuels my belief that Miles belongs and reminds me why Spider-Man is my favorite superhero of all time. Alright people, let's start at the beginning one last time. My name is Timur, aka SableStew, a video essay creator, and for the last 20 years or so, I have been obsessed with the one and only Spider-Man. Because growing up, there was only ever one Spider-Man.
There can't be two Spider-Men.
This passion developed during the golden age of the Tobey Maguire films. And well, you guys know the rest. I remember leaving the theater as a kid and being obsessed over Spider-Man, even playing all the Spider-Man games that I could get my hands on. Throughout my childhood, I loved how relatable Spider-Man was. He wasn't this rich billionaire or saint of a human being, but he was a normal person who had relatable problems. Problems with not being noticed, problems with finances, and the problem of the immense pressure to always be spectacular. And this made me feel seen. As Stan Lee puts it,
he's probably more like a regular person, a normal person, than any other character. Until Peter Parker, no superhero had ever had to worry about making a living, getting along well with girls.
he made me feel like I belonged, even if I had problems, no matter how big or how small, because he had them too. And I wanted to be like him. I wanted to have the strength to deal with problems, to save people and defeat the bad guys. I wanted to be a superhero. I can vividly remember trying to shoot webs from my hands hundreds of times, but I was disappointed every time I tried. I wanted to be special. I wanted to be super. It was when I became a teenager and Andrew Garfield became Spider-Man that I felt increasingly aware of how different I was from Spider-Man. I wasn't as good looking as he was. I wasn't as funny as he was. I wasn't as smart as he was. And finally, I wasn't a hero. I was just some random brown teen, and I definitely wasn't Peter Parker. Those movies, although I enjoyed them, constantly made me feel like someone like me didn't belong. That my problems were in fact unique to me, and I was suffering alone. I never tried to shoot webs from my hands again. Finally, when I saw Tom Holland as Spider-Man in Captain America: Civil War, I abandoned all ideas of being like Spider-Man and any ideas of being a superhero. I'm an adult now. I have freaking back pain.
Oh, my back!
And it's not because I fought some crazy supervillain or tried to save someone. It was because I just have terrible posture. And being an adult with back pain, I can't help but keep these movies separate from reality. Because they're just actors on that screen. And I know there's no such thing as superheroes or a Spider-Man in real life. And I didn't belong with the ever-increasing actors who play Spider-Man. but nothing could have prepared me for Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. Now here's the part where I brag a little. Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse was released on December 14th, 2018 in theaters. But luckily, I was able to watch it 12 days early thanks to an early showing while I was a student at UCLA. I was blown away with how good it was, and I fell in love with the film. It was my first time being introduced to Miles Morales, and I loved how they introduced him. Following the death of Peter Parker, Miles had the weight of becoming New York's new Spider-Man thrust upon his young shoulders. Throughout the movie, he constantly dealt with self-doubt and the pressure to live up to Peter's legacy, to live up to the name of Spider-Man, and if he even deserves to be called Spider-Man. As Kingpin's collider creates ripples in the multiverse, Miles is joined by a group of Spider-Folk that join him to save the multiverse. I was so surprised by the film because it was a story that related to the experience of college, or in a wider sense, school. Because school is a place where you learn to belong. You learn to find your community. And I always struggled to find my community. Jumping from major to major and being a brown kid in America, I never felt that I belonged. I wasn't aligned with my parents' culture, so I couldn't really call myself Indian or Pakistani, but I also couldn't call myself American because, well, I was brown. I never meshed into either culture, and neither felt like it was a place I belonged. But watching the movie, seeing Miles come from a multicultural background, gave me hope, because he wasn't just a black teen or a Puerto Rican teen. He wasn't defined by those cultures. And I loved the film's portrayal of Miles as Spider-Man, because the film never made it feel like he was there to fulfill a diversity requirement. He wasn't checking off a box for Black Spider-Man or Puerto Rican Spider-Man. He was a Spider-Man who happened to be both Black and Puerto Rican. His race and ethnicity are central to his identity, but not central to every battle he faced. And ultimately, the movie showed that he belonged, especially with his group of spider friends who taught him how to be the best version of himself. They taught him that everyone has problems and that he wasn't alone. He had their support to tackle his problems and gave him a purpose beyond just school. Miles had found his people and found that he belonged as a superhero. And I loved the feeling that everyone can be a hero, that anyone can wear the mask, that everyone can have problems, and finding your own people can help you overcome them. It made me feel super, a feeling I haven't felt since I was a kid.
It always fits. Eventually.
Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse is the perfect film to watch in college, because it's all about understanding your role in society and understanding who you are. It's about finding your community, and it's about belonging in that community for who you are. And it made me make room for a new Spider-Man in my Spider-Man obsession. Leaving the theater, I was ecstatic. I was extremely excited to find my people, to build a community, and to tell everyone about it. And, well, no one had seen it. I had to wait an entire 12 days before the movie was in theaters, so I couldn't gush about the film and its details to any of my friends or family. And those 12 days were excruciating, especially since I was being buried underneath all the work and finals that I had. It felt like I never had enough time, because I was struggling during college. Struggling to find my community, struggling to find my purpose and get through classes, and struggling to feel spectacular. But Into the Spider-Verse made me feel spectacular, even for a fleeting moment, and I was hopeful for the future. So instead of gushing about it to all my friends, I did what any normal person would do. I bought a PS4 and played the latest Spider-Man game that released earlier in the year. And it was amazing. Swinging through the streets of New York City was such an amazing experience that I haven't had since I was playing the games as a child. Quickly beating up bad guys with the acrobatic skills that Peter had felt so empowering, and being able to take down Spider-Man's biggest villains felt spectacular, especially in the final battle against Doc Ock. The game solidified itself as one of the greatest games I've played in recent history. I even tried to shoot webs from my hands once again. But there was something off about the game. There was an anomaly with how I felt about the game, specifically the introduction of Miles Morales in the game, because my previous notions about Miles were, thanks to Into the Spider-Verse, was that he took over after Peter dies. But in the game, Miles gets bitten by a spider, he's taken under Peter's wing, and learns to be his own version of Spider-Man, especially as he got his own amazing spin-off game as well. The games were wildly different from what I was expecting, and they followed an entirely different storyline. A story where Miles' father dies, and New York had 2 Spider-Mans. Spider-Man? Do we still call Miles Spider-Man when there's already another established Spider-Man? I was conflicted. Both versions of Miles Morales that I had grown used to were both distinctly different, but had plenty of similarities. For example, both of them had the same parents. Both were trained and found community with Peter, and both had their story fleshed out within their universes. But their stories were different, almost entirely. But as both Mileses became cemented in my mind, I kept asking myself, which version of Miles did I prefer? Which version of Miles did I like better? And which version of Miles belonged? I'm not a big fan of non-canon stories, or non-canon events. It almost feels fake to me to see the same story, but slightly different. It feels like only one story should truly belong. That one story should be the definitive story of Miles. But regardless of whichever story of Miles it was, it reignited my passion for Spider-Man, and for finding my own community. And these feelings kept me going all the way past graduation. And then...
The breaking news, stay at home, that is the order tonight as the coronavirus pandemic spreads.
I can't even begin to describe how devastating the COVID-19 pandemic was on the world. Not just for health reasons, but for connection and the feeling of belonging. As lockdowns, social distancing measures, and remote work became the new norm, our physical interactions with other people dwindled. While we tried to maintain some semblance of connectivity, virtual meetings and social media interactions often left us feeling more isolated and detached than before. Political and social divisions heightened as we created a system of othering that led to distrust in institutions and each other. And all of these amounted into a mental health crisis and a loneliness epidemic that we still struggle with today. Something broke with society, and the pandemic added a great amount of fuel to a fire that was already burning for a long time. While my social circle disintegrated due to both the impacts of COVID and being out of college, I soon felt that I was alone. I felt that there wasn't a community for me, and that I didn't belong. Everyone was on their own, and that feeling of isolation has stuck with me throughout all of these years. Even the premiere of No Way Home, which hyped me up seeing all the Spider-Man again, seeing Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield in their nostalgic Spider-Man costumes, left me feeling lost, as Tom Holland's Peter Parker wound up alone, without the family he had with Aunt May, and the friends that he's made along the way. For the first time, I felt that I saw myself with Tom Holland's Spider-Man. I had felt that my problems and my feelings of isolation were showcased on screen, and I hated it. It served as a constant reminder that despite how Peter Parker was a superhero, he still struggled with finding his connection and belonging in this new world. And what hope does that give me? Because I'm still me. Plain old, unsuperpowered me who is still trying to find where I belong. And I've felt that way for so long. With relationships with friends crumbling and loved ones passing away, why was it just so hard to hold on? Why was it so hard to find where I belong? What was I doing wrong? Am I just a mistake? These feelings followed me throughout my life, and even followed me into the theater for one of the greatest movies I have ever seen. Watching Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse in theaters was a moment that I had been waiting for 5 devastatingly long years. But despite the wait, the movie was absolutely amazing. And despite it being one of the best movies in recent history, I can't help but linger on this question again. Does Miles belong? In Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, we follow Miles again after the end of Into the Spider-Verse. Miles is still juggling both of his identities, one being Spider-Man and one being a normal high school student with 2 loving parents. After being separated from his group, with the community that made him feel like he belonged, he desperately wanted to see them again, especially to see Gwen again. He even planned out his college career to help him learn and possibly develop a way to travel the multiverse, just to see them again. When Gwen finally visits him, he is ecstatic to be able to see her again, to share moments with her again, and to finally feel like he can be with someone who understands him again. When she suddenly leaves, he risks everything by following her and jumping into an interdimensional portal that he knows nothing of the consequences. All he wanted to do was to be with her, to be with the people he belonged with, and he was willing to sacrifice everything for that. It was until he reached the Spider Society where he realizes that they were never planning on seeing him, that they couldn't risk everything to see him, and that ultimately he didn't belong with them because he hadn't shared the same canon events. He was, by Miguel's words,
You're a mistake!
Miguel's words echoed throughout my head as it was the same view I had for myself. I felt that I was a mistake. Watching Miles no longer feel the connection and sense of belonging with those he had admired reflected the experiences that I was feeling. Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse was no longer a story about college, about school. It became a story about graduation and the subsequent separation of everyone, leading to declining friendships by either physical distance or differing life goals. Because Miles, after having his moments connecting and creating memories with the ones he held close, ends up just like Peter at the end of No Way Home, and just like myself after graduating college. He had only himself left. And now the question comes back to mind. Does Miles belong? And now I can't help but wonder, what is Miles even supposed to belong to? At the end of the movie, Miles ends up in a universe that he doesn't even belong to. And it echoes what people have been saying constantly. That Miles is a mistake. That Miles doesn't belong in the Spider Society.
You don't belong here.
And that Miles' story doesn't belong as a Spider-Man story.
Everyone keeps telling me how my story is supposed to go. Nah, I'm gonna do my own thing.
Upon hearing Miles' words, I realized that my idea of belonging had been wrong this whole time. Miles always belongs in the way just like we all belong. He belongs because he has his own individual, unique story that allows him to do things in his own way. For the longest time, I felt that belonging is just being able to connect with others. Friendships, relationships, the bonds we form with others, and the acceptance of others are the only sources of belonging. But belonging is not limited to physical spaces or people. Belonging is also accepting yourself. It's embracing your individuality, your unique story, and your own superpowers. The opposite of belonging is fitting in. Fitting into a group would mean sacrificing parts of yourself to fit a certain mold. But true belonging is accepting yourself and your identity. When we accept ourselves fully, we don't feel constrained to fit someone else's expectations. And when we can embrace our identities, we can feel that deeper sense of belonging. We all have our own journeys. No two individuals are exactly alike because they each have their own unique origin stories. And just like their stories, no two journeys to belonging are the same either. I constantly felt like I didn't belong. When watching a myriad of movies and television shows, no story ever felt like it represented me in the way that I hoped. Even watching Pavitra Prabhakar, an Indian Spider-Man, was so heartwarming that it started to make me feel seen. But quickly, you see that he finds being Spider-Man so easy, that he has amazing hair, and that he doesn't have many debilitating problems with life. Seeing his perfect life made it increasingly obvious that my problems, my struggles, were unique to me. And that's okay. Because belonging is beyond just sharing similar struggles with others. Despite Miles not experiencing his canon event and not sharing the struggles of the Spider Society, he still belonged. Because his story and experiences are unique to him. All versions of Miles belong, because they all have their own unique perspectives. But despite those perspectives, Miles shares universal experiences and emotions with all of the Spider people. Grief, loneliness, disappointment, anger, fear, connection, joy, and love.
Dad, I love you.
That's a copy.
And those experiences aren't just unique to Spider people, they're universal for all of us. We all have the same emotions, and this is what connects us and makes us deserving of knowing that we belong. Every experience belongs, and Miles Morales' experience is no exception. He belongs with his family, he belongs with his communities, and he belongs as Spider-Man. Because every spider has their own web, and if you follow each thread, you'll be entangled in a wide net connecting us all, because belonging is universal, and we all deserve to feel like we belong, because we do. And finding our sense of belonging can be daunting. It can feel impossible. Hell, it's always felt that way for me. But if I can say Miles Morales belongs, even both versions of him that I was introduced to, because they both have their unique stories, and if I can say that everyone belongs and deserves to belong, because they also have their unique stories, why was it so hard for me to feel like I belong? For the longest time, I felt that my story was never valued or represented in media, and therefore my unique experiences did not belong in society. But belonging isn't just feeling like you relate to someone's story. It's recognizing that your own story is valuable. And in sharing my own story and experiences, I finally realized that I do belong, and that there are ways and people in my life that make me feel like I belong. Sharing my story is never the end, because I know that there's always a continuation to our stories, and they all belong. But for now, I will always come back to this scene.
For years, I've been taking care of this little boy, right? Making sure he is loved, that he feels like he belongs wherever he wants to be.
Hearing Rio's words and watching her embrace her son. This moment fills me with love. It fills me with hope that everyone can find their sense of belonging. It fuels my passion to why Miles' story and unique experiences belong in their own way. And reminds me that Spider-Man is a superhero that can have a never-ending amount of stories. But that doesn't make any of the stories mean less to any of us. Because there are so many stories out there. There are so many diverse experiences. And as the world connects us more than ever once again, there is a multitude of ways to accept yourself and find the communities that make us feel accepted for our stories and make us feel like we belong. And once you can find the strength and love for your own story and realize that there are people out there who will resonate with your true self, the possibilities for belonging are endless, and every one of them spectacular. Upon finishing the movie once again and gearing up for the wait for more Spider-Man content, I realized that there will always be more on the horizon. And if I just wait long enough, there will always be more beyond the Spider-Verse.